so excited you're here. Welcome to this month's virtual Plant Medicine 101. My name is Rianne. I'm 21 Acres Administrative Assistant, and I'm live at the campus today. If you've ever seen our virtual events through 2020, you'll see that I was in my bedroom hosting these, but back at the farm, we're figuring out how we open safely here. And Dr. Sarah Sue Myers is joining us. She is our educator today, and she is live at Nourishcraft Farm in Bellingham. And we've been lucky to work with Sarah Sue throughout the last couple of years. She teaches about plant medicine, the medicine around us that's waiting to be harvested, and just poignant themes of wellness. So you're in for a really good treat today. Thank you again for being here. For today's class, I just wanted to quickly say that we love your participation on these events. Feel free to comment in the chat box anything that you are curious about. If there's any questions, please just filter them into the chat box and I will be there to read them to Sarah Sue. And yeah, I just wanted to also give a little bit of insight into 21 Acres and who we are if you're not aware. So 21 Acres is located in Woodinville, Washington. And to give a land acknowledgement, we are on the ancestral lands of Indigenous nations, including the Stillaguamish, the Duwamish, and the Coast Salish people. And we honor and acknowledge these nations past and present as the original stewards of this land. We honor both the land itself and the Coast Salish people. Dr. Sarah Sue is in Bellingham today as well, which is home to the Lummi Nation, among many other tribes. And we just wanted to give thanks to, everyone who's stewarded this land before us and how important it is to continue honoring this legacy. And 21 Acres aims to do that through educating the community about climate change, sustainable lifestyle, permaculture, regenerative farming, supporting local soil safe farmers, and also employing sustainable building technology. I don't know if you can see it, but we got solar panels up there, a living roof, and a bunch of other fun things. So check us out on our website, and I also will link something for Sarah Sue's website as well. But yeah, so that's a little bit about who we are. And now, without further ado, I will give it to Sarah Sue to take us on a wonderful tour. Thank you. And
thank you for that introduction, Rianne. And thank you all for joining today. I'm Dr. Sarah Sue. That is what I go by first name. My last name is Myers, and I am a naturopathic doctor. My business is Journey Home Healing, and I'm located up here in Bellingham, Washington. And again, reporting from Nourishcraft Farms. And thank you so much for the land acknowledgement that you provided, Rianne. I just want to echo honoring this land and the stewards that came before us. Journey Home Healing. I offer naturopathic medicine and naturopathic doctoring, but additionally, I really step into the roles as coach and counselor for my patients and clients. Something I'm really passionate about is supporting not just on that physical level, but the mental, emotional level. Which if you've attended any of these plant medicine walks, you've probably noticed that I like to bring in not only the physical components of plants, but some of the themes that lie more on the mental, emotional, and spiritual realm with the plants that I talk about and introduce. Feel free to ask questions as in the chat box as we go through today's class. And Rianne and myself will be keeping an eye on that. And I do like to answer questions that seem relevant at the time during the class instead of reserving the end for all the Q&A. And if I do feel like I'm going to be covering it, I will just go ahead and wait until I circle back to that topic. And just like a check-in today, I made a video promo for this class 2 weeks ago here at Nourishcraft Farms. And one thing that I had been talking about and noting of my observations of the farm this year is just how much drier it is, and noticing the different signs of stress, of less water, more of a drought year, and hotter. And I just wanted to actually open up right away this morning and see. I don't know where all of you are located who are attending today, but I'm curious to hear, like, stating your location and sharing if you've noticed anything yourself of your observations of nature around you this summer compared to past summers, if there is anything. While you take a minute to do that, I just want to show you, there was one plant that I was really wanting to talk about, but it just seems a little bit late in the season at this point. All of these yellow stems and stalks are the remainder of the chamomile plants.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That does seem early.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm. I know. And it was really fascinating, actually. When I was out here two weeks ago and made that video with my son Leonidas, I tried a couple of the chamomile flowers, and holy smokes, they were so bitter. so bitter. You know, a lot of the medicinal constituents that plants make are not to benefit us, though they certainly do, but the primary reason they make them is to protect and benefit themselves. They're called secondary compounds, many of them. And there's protective mechanisms with things like the stressors of excess heat, drought, predatory, insects and such. And so, if you were to look at the same plant, but in two different locations, let's say, so one of the plants we're going to be talking about today is calendula. So let's say calendula that's cultivated in a garden, that's watered regularly, the soil is amended, and it's just really has a lot of like TLC in the cultivation of it. It's going to be beautiful and gorgeous and have, it'll have the medicinal constituents, versus the calendula that grows maybe as a volunteer or wild in a field where it is not watered regularly, where it's just taken up residence. No one's really stewarding that area, and so it's not getting amended with extra nutrients like phosphorus. That one's going to take on different characteristics. It might be a little bit smaller, but then those secondary compounds, those medicinal compounds, may be a lot higher and more medicinal in the long run. So I think with tasting that chamomile last week or 2 weeks ago, then that extreme bitterness, it just was really a testament to the stress that plant has endured this season, compared to past seasons. That heat and the fire season, at least up here in Washington, Pacific Northwest, it came a month early this year. So I've really just been, paying attention to the surroundings and getting signs from nature as to how this particular season's impacting the plants and those around us. Hello from Port Orchard. Yes, hello, greetings.
Yes, it's so interesting also to see where everyone comes from. Some people come from all over the world. Like, we get people from England who last year we had a really sweet group that would consistently join from England on your tours.
Yes.
That was so fun. And it's similar climates, but it also, makes me think about how these seasons are changing a little bit, which is definitely disturbing, but also maybe I kind of feel like the plants will come out and reveal themselves and be, available because of not because of, but they join with like our illnesses and are offering remedy support at the time that they're supposed to be But I worry that if the seasons are changing and we're not prepared, what we can do to harvest and store our remedies that we might want to make and make sure that they last through these unpredictable times when you might need them.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
wild.
And one thing's for sure is, you know, climate change is here. It's happening. It's a dynamic thing, and we are continuing to watch and observe as that unfolds, sometimes quite unpredictably, but sometimes like it very much within the parameters of the predictions that the scientists did predict. Which there are days that I'm filled with a lot of grief and despair about it. I try not to sit in despair too long because that can be kind of paralyzing. I was listening to Glennon Doyle recently on one of her podcasts, and she was speaking about despair and how if you stay there too long, it can really like suck you in. But a good way to channel that what's those values that are being challenged is through activism and channeling it into something that you do. And there's so many ways to channel that. You know, combating and dealing with the reality of climate change, and like what can we do as individuals, as family units, as organizations, as communities. What are the possibilities of things that we can do to begin to counter it and address it, and, you know, create a more hopeful future for these younger generations. And again, if any of you guys attending today have any insight or ideas or things that you have been doing, feel free to share, whether now or like 30 minutes from now. It's okay. It's just a continuing conversation.
Yeah.
And Rhiann, I'm going to let you woman that so I can focus on the other things here.
That sounds great. I did just share in the chat that just how much I love that. Like how can we channel that into action and taking action on our climate and you know, really showing up for the land as well. And one of the best ways to start this just action is through planting and getting plants back in the ground. It gets really specific too when you look into your region and everything that could be supporting those ecosystems. But planting is one of the best ways to you know, sequester carbon, to keep the soils where they should stay, so there's no erosion, and keep the water underground and take it back into the roots. And so if anyone's ever been eager to start planting, now's the time. Anytime's the time. But go right ahead and get curious. I'm excited to dive into these plants with you to, you know, to see. I am curious when the best time would be to plant calendula and mullein, which are some of our big topics today. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, well, let's start with our first plant friend. I have a couple next to me in different growth stages that I'm excited to show. Let's get you turned around screen. There we go. So here's the base. So these are a little bit older stages. This one's still got some green. Here's the flowering head. And another one here. Let me find a more vibrant specimen. Here we go. Here are the flowers. And I'm gonna just get a nice close-up of this.
That is gorgeous.
I know. So this is mullein flower. And yeah, so the flowers of the mullein are yellow. And those, oh golly, the pistil anther combination. What's that pistil anther part has the orange pollen on it, which there is certainly like a chromotherapy color therapy theme going on today between the mullein and that calendula. We have a lot of yellow and orange going on today. So I will, if we have time, I will talk a little bit about that. But for now, I want to continue introducing mullein. So those are her flowers. Nice big flowering stalk. Usually there's a primary one, but there can be secondary ones that come out. The pattern reminds me a lot of saguaro cacti down in the Southwest desert. But then as you go lower, you see the leaves coming off, and everything blooms from a base, or another name for it is a floret. Here's a great example of a younger one. The floret reminds me very much of the pattern of like the English roses, the rose petal formation. Oh, and it's so sweet. You can see all the raindrops from this morning's rain collected on the mullein leaves. The texture of the mullein leaves is soft and fuzzy, and it actually has that description in the Latin name itself. So Verbascum thapsus is the Latin name for mullein. There's also a Verbascum olympus, I believe, which is literally just like a giant version of this. It makes me think of like Mount Olympus, where the Greek gods lived, and how they are like the great, powerful, mighty ones that, are there. And then there's like the smaller form, are the humans that don't live on Mount Olympus. But bearded one, verbascum, is rooted from the Latin word bearded one, and mollis has a French, Celtic, and Latin root in fuzzy or soft. So the name of this plant, literally is referred to as like the fuzzy bearded one, which is a good way to remember this plant. Another plant that has a similar presentation and formation, earlier in the season before the flowers form, that can look very similar, but is a toxic plant that you don't want to take internally, is foxglove or digitalis. That is an herb you do not want to take internally. Again, there aren't any specimens out here, otherwise I would show you those, but I have definitely found myself scratching my head like, well, which one's which? And one way to tell is that the mullein leaves tend to be a lot more soft and fuzzy. However, if you are not 100% sure with any plants that you are wildcrafting and identifying in nature, just err on the side of caution and let it be, and learn from her. Plant pronoun, insert plant pronoun here. Historically, the mullein was the flower stalk was harvested, and it would be dipped in tallow, and people would use it as a torch. And so the tallow would be the flammable material, and it would be like a flame torch. And I think that this is like such a beautiful analogy for like, I think this conversation and topic we're talking about with climate change, even though there's like a lot of grief and despair, like realizing how it's here, what can we bring light to? Where is our like flaming torch that keeps the room lit so that we don't fall into like this dark despair? There's a lot of energetic properties with mullein that have to do with just being illuminating and uplifting. Even in that color right there, that chromotherapy.
Yes, it's so joyous. It's
yeah.
It seems like it was a beacon for a lot of different reasons. Like that's so cool to learn the history of it, and some of its practical uses of being a, a torch. That is awesome. I would never have imagined people creating torches out of such sweet, beautiful plants, but it makes sense. It makes so much
I
sense.
know,
They were
right?
inspired by the flower.
Yeah. Well, and so I actually wrote a blog article about Mullen that you can find on my website, Journey Home Healing, that goes into more details of what I'm covering today that you can check out. And there's references there if you want to do further research of your own. But one thing is that um, mullein is also great at, compacting the soil and preventing erosion. I don't know if you've noticed, but like mullein has a broad range of habitat. Not only is it like inhabiting Nourish Craft Farm amongst the snow peas and calendula, but I often see mullein growing on the side of the road, like this dry, rocky, dirty places where it seems like it would be impossible for a plant to grow. And there you will find mullein. She takes residence and inhabits places that seem potentially inhabitable for a lot of other plants. She is considered an invasive species as well, but like you were saying, Rianne, I think that this planet does offer medicines to us that we need at these certain times. And mullein comes out like at this time of year. She's actually right on time, plant, like bloom wise, which is a time of year when the heat is on the rise, the water is on decline, and wildfires start. And when it comes to the medicinal properties of mullein, the first organ system I think about is the respiratory system and the lungs. That is where a very large majority of the medicinal action of mullein occurs within the body, is helping the lungs, especially in times when there are certain symptom pictures.
Wow. Well, this is really, really, just like another beacon of hope for sustainable medicine, harvesting through such a, respiratory conscious time with COVID, with the fires that have been ravaging the world. And also, I believe you and I, when we spoke, you mentioned that the lungs can also resonate to grief, and how we're processing and how we're releasing and taking in just the different aspects of the world, but truly trying to be conscious of how we're breathing when we're grieving. Is that accurate?
Oh, I don't know if I could have said it better.
Aw.
Yes. Right. And the fact that you brought in not only the lungs being connected to grief, but yeah, like how we're responding and are we breathing? As we're watching stuff happen, are we holding our, like, metaphorically or literally, like holding our breath, waiting to see what happens? Or are we taking our, stepping into our own agency and power and continuing to remind ourselves to breathe and do something, channel that into something. Hello there, mosquito. Go back to the mullein. So as far as lung medicine, it's primarily the leaves that are used, and I will just show you. So the way that I will come in and harvest the leaves, I will leave the stalk. Maybe one day I'll experiment with making my own tallow torch. But you can just peel it right off at the base, like so. And that's essentially how you harvest the leaves. I usually try to start at the base and go up, and the bottom ones can get a little mildewy, dirty. They're going to wither up first, but going up a little bit higher to find nicer specimens that have that green, aren't disrupted too much by mold or mildew, and have that nice fuzziness to it. And my first step that I personally do when I harvest mullen leaf is drying it, whether in the dehydrator or just in the air if it's not too humid out. The mullen leaf, the picture that mullen leaf helps with is if there is a cough that feels dry and kind of painful, like, you know, those dry hacking coughs that you can get where there's like a spasming sort of nature to the cough, that kind of cough where you start coughing and it begets more coughing and more coughing. It's like the more you cough, the more you need to cough. The medical terminology for that is paroxysmal coughs. Mullen to the rescue. So the mullein leaf can help. It has mild antispasmodic properties. So that helps reduce that spasming nature of the muscles within the respiratory tract itself to help calm and soothe that spasming. But it also has some demulcent or mucilaginous soothing elements to soothing that dry hacking nature of a cough. And as an expectorant, which is an herbal action name for promoting productive coughing. Promoting productive coughing, expectorant.
Awesome.
I am going to take this little specimen. It's starting to sprinkle. We're going to just take shelter for a moment here as we continue talking about mullein. And really the easiest way to get this sort, you know, to take mullein is simply by doing an herbal tea. I actually formulated a tea that I'm almost through right now that has the combination of calendula and mullein in it. Just like, you know, an infusion, you know, hot boiled water. This mug in particular has, it's got like the little, like, you can do like the whole herbs right in there. I sifted them out beforehand or strained them out. But that's a good way for the use of mullein, is simply just making a hot tea, which, you know, a hot tea in itself, with or without mullein, can be so palliative and soothing. And when you're dealing with like respiratory inflammation, upper or lower, when there's like irritation and coughing going on, you know, a hot beverage can be quite therapeutic in itself. One thing I do notice with the mullein leaf, which is quite safe. Ooh, this one's bitter. There are those hairs. So, which can be a little bit irritating in the mouth. So I wouldn't recommend like eating it just whole like this. I just did the example so to make sure I had an accurate description to give you. The flowers, on the other hand, are a lot not as hairy. Let's get a good focus here. These are.
Oh, sorry. Is this in full bloom right now, or would it all turn yellow at some point?
Yeah, they do at some point. See how there's like all these little florets or like buds. They usually start from the top. You can see that top one right there. And then they just continue to flower and move down the pod as they flower. And they're actually quite easy to remove. I'll show you here. It's actually one of my more favorite herbs to harvest, but you can just simply pull that flower out of the pod intact.
Beautiful.
This is so funny. I'm like experiencing the picture of mullein when it's needed.
No. I'm sorry.
I knew this is why I brought the tea.
Healing in action.
All right. With the flower, also demulcent, so that mucilaginous soothing that you can have. I'm gonna just turn it. She's giving me a medicine. Another cool thing with the mullein flower is that you can do an oil infusion with it, which has anti-inflammatory properties to it, soothing properties to it. I'm so sorry, guys.
No worries.
And this can be great with helping with irritation in the ear canals, which I talk about in that blog of mine about mullein. You can actually find, I know Wise Woman Herbals makes an ear oil formula with mullein flowers and garlic.
Ooh.
I'm eating some sweet basil to counter it. And it can be really helpful. However, I will make note, never put anything in your ears unless you've had a doctor look in your ears to make sure that your eardrum, your tympanic membrane is not ruptured. If you were to put something in your ear and you had a ruptured eardrum, there can be a pretty big risk of irritation, inflammation, worst case scenario, hearing loss. So I just want to make that really clear. Like, be careful with that and get your doctor, get a expert eye inside that ear before you start putting stuff in there internally. But it can be really effective for otitis media or ear infection, just helping soothe and calm those symptoms down. Let's see, are there any questions or comments coming in, Rianne?
Yes, we just got a great question asking, what do you add to your Mullen tea infusion?
What do I add to my Mullen tea infusion? Yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, I really like making formulas where so it's not just a single herb, but I like adding different kinds of herbs, which there's, you know, that term synergy, where it's like one plus one doesn't necessarily equal 2. In synergy, like 1 plus 1 can equal 5 or 10. You know, it's like when you combine the powers of 2 things, you just get that much more out of it. And I think about that with using herbal medicine. When you begin to combine medicinal herbs, you get more of a therapeutic result with the tea. So let's say with Mullen Leaf, we're addressed, like, say there is a picture of like a cough, that like maybe some sort of upper respiratory thing, or maybe the smoke rolled in and it's like day 5, a wildfire smoke in the air, and I just need something to like soothe and calm down my airway. Mullein would certainly be at the top of my list. I would also be thinking of other herbs that help with just lowering inflammation in general. When I think of that, the ones that I currently have at my house that also grow out here, I'll actually show you one because she's just like literally hanging out over here. Well, the first one was chamomile. Chamomile is a great anti-inflammatory plant that has so many different herbal actions and properties. I really like adding chamomile to a lot of things because of that. But then also, this one is holy basil. Holy basil also has anti-inflammatory properties as well, and it's incredibly tasty and a lot of other magical properties that we will either talk about another day, or you can go to the archives. I believe I talked about holy basil sometime in July or August last year, so you can go back and check out that particular plant medicine walk.
I want to share that we're going to have a little follow-up email to all of you who registered through Eventbrite, and we're going to share Sarah Sue's blog and a couple other fun things. Maybe I was thinking about the breathing practice we did in one of our classes this April. Was so nice, and just on that topic of, you know, helping your lungs again. And yeah, we're gonna share some resources. We also got another couple of questions. So, sorry about this. I lost my little spot. What would aid best to promote healing COPD with Mullen? And what is, if you could elaborate on COPD, I'm actually new to that term.
COPD is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. There's different categories underneath it. I do need to be careful with giving too much specific medical advice in a walk like this. So I will give you sort of like broad strokes. If you are interested in learning more specifics of a treatment, I would highly recommend making an appointment with someone like a naturopathic doctor like myself to get more specific advice, and also just to make sure like safety aspects. Like one thing you do need to work consider when you're beginning using new herbs and plants is making sure that if you're on any drugs or medication, pharmaceuticals essentially, that there's not any contraindications with new herbs that you are taking in. There are some decent resources online, but another good resource is really just consulting with someone who's had adequate training with herbal use, and naturopathic doctors do have incredible training when it comes to botanical herbal medicine. But in general with COPD, it's about, when I think about conditions like that, I think about what systems need to be supported. And surely the respiratory system is there that needs to be supported. But also I always am searching for and asking the question of like, well, what's the underlying cause? What's the root cause of why that's there in the first place? Because we can treat it all day until the cows come home. But if that insult is still there and still in the picture, how far are we actually going to get with symptom relief and healing and recovery? So it's an important thing to think about. And also, like, I think with any condition, whether it's COPD or like an asthma allergy picture, is what's like day-to-day self-care look like? Foundations of health and care. Are you getting enough sleep and rest? Are you drinking enough water? What's your diet like? What's your support system like? Are you connected with people outside of yourself, your immediate circle, whether that, it's, related family or, composed family? Connection is so incredibly important to health. And I just don't think it's honored and acknowledged enough. At least it wasn't before 2020. I think we're realizing just how important how clear it is that we need each other for health and sanity. So there's a lot of elements and moving pieces that we can think about with just how to maintain general health before we dive into more specifics of like, how do we treat this exact condition, which is a very conventional medicine type of thing to do, where it's like, with pharmaceuticals, it's like, we're going to go with this specific action in this specific chemical pathway to manipulate this and change it, versus taking a big look back and being like, well, yeah, like there's like significant grief going on and there's mold in their house. Let's talk about that first.
That's a really holistic, of course, approach. Am I surprised? No, because you're so great at piecing. There's a whole spectrum of the person, and that includes past trauma, that includes current living situations. Mold is so creepy. It's so silent, and I feel like very overlooked, but I realize, yeah, it can be at the heart of a lot of people's respiratory issues. This is so helpful. We do have just 2 more questions, and we are also at a 20-minute time check. So I know calendula is a really just beautiful plant and hot topic, so I definitely want to get to that too. So for Mullen, when are the leaves ready, or how do you dry the leaves, and how do you know when they're ready?
Yeah, that's a good question, because mullein when it dries, it doesn't get as crumbly and crackly as other leaves. So sometimes it does take a little bit of practice, or you can buy some dried mullein leaves, like from a place where they sell in bulk, whether that's a co-op or an herbal store, your local herbal store. So you can get a sense and idea of how that looks and feels dried, so that when you go to do it, you kind of have a reference range for how dry it is. And again, you can so there's a dehydrator option, or you can simply just lay it on a screen or like in a basket, something that has air circulation above and below, and let it air dry that way. Of course, like this week, I probably wouldn't do that in the Pacific Northwest right now because of the humidity that's present. I'd wait, or another way is just hanging up a bunch of leaves and, with a string and letting them air dry that way. Especially if you don't have a lot of space to lay something out like a screen or a basket. Was there another question, Rianne?
Yes, and can you eat the flowers of the plant or use the flowers in anything delicious?
Yeah, you can eat them. And actually, as you can tell, I would not recommend eating the mullein leaves, or you might start getting it's so interesting. Plants sometimes have these, it's like the small doses of it create the symptoms in which that it can help. I feel it's like that homeopathic, likes heals likes. But with the flowers, again, they're soothing and demulcent. Another cool action of them, besides like anti-inflammatory and helping calm down inflammation, is that they also help soothe frazzled nerves. They can be very calming and soothing to the nervous system in that way. And so, yeah, you could make an herbal tea with them, or like an oil infusion as well. I don't actually see a lot of products with the mullein flowers, and maybe because they're just so tiny. I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's a market for it.
They're so
there's a lot to be learned about.
They're like it's funny how like these incredibly bright flowers like buttercup and dandelions and now mullein, I'm learning, are all weeds that pop out that support pollinators, support those soils that have nothing, but they're so bright and lovely and they have some good uses.
Yes, and thank you for saying that, Rianne, because I was just doing a little bit of extra research to see if I could find any cool tidbits to bring in today. And one thing I learned about the mullein flowers, as well as the calendula flowers, is that yellow-orange color provides UV protection to the plants.
Oh.
And there's like UV detection of the flowers that attract the insects and pollinators. Wow. So, going back to the power of that color, it's therapeutic for us to see these bright colors. I mean, let's just switch this screen so you guys can get some chromotherapy while I talk about this.
Oh my God, they're so beautiful.
Yeah, it's just like a big landing pad for the pollinators. And mullein is incredibly, it grows anywhere. It's an easy one to grow and cultivate. Calendula is the same. It's like the best plant to start if you're beginning, just learning how to plant and cultivate herbs. Such a good one to start with. And I like this spot too. So you would have this nice fresh calendula flower. So we are going to move on to calendula and introduce her. But here is the dried flower. After, let's see if I can pull it apart. Once the leaves and once the petals dry up and fall off, and these little curly things, those are the seeds.
Yes, we had a comment earlier about how one of our participants is surrounded by wild mullein and has planted resinous calendula, and that they spread the seeds in various areas locally. And I just think that's such a great thing. Thank you for doing that.
Guerrilla seed action. Yeah, we have this sidewalk coming up across the street from where we're living, and it looks like there's a spot where they're going to be doing plants, but I'm kind of thinking of sneaking over there and planting some calendula to bring some more pollinators and color to the neighborhood.
Yes, Great for the soil, great for,
Yeah.
just another added layer of protection for the soil and the water there. So keep on planting. Okay.
Calendula officinalis is the Latin name. Calendula, Latin word, calendar. This plant's named because, well, I kind of interpret it as twofold. If one way to keep calendula flowers going throughout the whole year, or to increase their season, is simply by harvesting it. The more you harvest calendula, the more she gives and blooms and flowers. It's talk about a symbiotic relationship, right? So that's one reason it's called calendula, because it can grow throughout the whole calendar year in certain areas in the world. But also, it's cyclical even in a day. The flowers open when the sun is out, and when the sun goes down, they close up for the night. Similar to the behavior of morning glories. And then officinalis, the name officinalis in Latin, is a common species name for any plants that have medicinal properties, simply put. And the calendula flower, so this is the part that's used, the flower, but also importantly, it's green base at the bottom, which holds a significant amount of those medicines. So when I think of calendula, the first organ system I think of is skin. Skin it's so soothing and healing for the skin. It is helpful at soothing the pain with, scratches, cuts, scrapes, insect bites, skin conditions like eczema. And that herbal action is called vulnerary, which just means to soothe or palliate from pain. It also has anti-inflammatory properties, antibacterial properties. So, it's not only helping soothe from pain, it's helping to reduce risk of infection and sepsis. A lot of doctors and medics on the field had calendula flowers in their medicine bags in Europe during World War II, as well as during the Civil War. Calendula flowers were a very common first aid at helping support the soldiers when they got injured. So it's got a long history of use.
I'm so curious to learn how they used it. Was fresh application, like pressing into the petals on lesions or wounds, and or other things like boiling or solvents? Or...
Yeah. So if you have fresh, they did a lot of poultices. I think with both, likely it was probably dried, and you can still do that. When you do a poultice with fresh, you can actually put fresh calendula in a blender and blend it up, and it creates this thing called a succus. That's what it's called in the herbal world. SUCCUS, I believe, is the spelling of it. And then place that as a topical on the skin, or like an herbal wash, right? Because they didn't have like things like iodine back then as an antiseptic, so they had to turn to herbal medicine quite a bit. You could, with the dry flowers, you could also do an hot water herbal infusion, and then use that as an herbal wash. So either extracting it from the dry flower or a fresh flower, you get that same action and those properties. Another cool thing that the calendula does is helps move and support lymphatic drainage. So the lymph carries a lot of the white blood cells that are part of, our immune system that helps us heal and take care of infection. It also helps with the cleanup. The immune system cleans up all that cellular debris wherever there is the site of a wound, and gets stuff out of there and brings in fresh resources of new blood, new new materials that help build, support like collagen regrowth, connective tissue regrowth. Vitamin C is an important part of the collagen matrix. Which reminds me of another cool action of calendula. It has antioxidant properties because of the flavonoids in it. That's one of the chemical constituents in calendula is the flavonoids. Flav in Latin is yellow. So, but that actually helps continue to help the vitamin C stay in its active therapeutic form to combat free radicals in the body.
God, that's amazing. I may have missed just a little bit of if you ingest the flower through a tea, through just even, I know that this flower too is edible, right? You can sprinkle it onto salads and anything delicious. But that contains the vitamin C, or is it also in or in the greener part, or?
It doesn't have vitamin C, but it has flavonoids that help keep the vitamin C and it in the form that helps it reduce free radicals.
So like joining it together with the vitamin C rich food, like, the 1 + 1 is a million.
Yeah, that could be one way to look at it. Our bodies don't make vitamin C, so it is really important. That's why there's so much emphasis on vitamin C. And it is important to get that, but then our vitamin C stores are, they're constantly like moving electrons around and making things go from like a free radical that can be, harmful to our tissues at that cellular level to reduce so that it's like neutralized and safe. And so with plant flavonoids, they help kind of like feed that process and help keep that cycle going. And yes, they are edible. I will say the petals are much more mild and have that mucilaginous slimy feel to it, which can be very soothing to the digestive tract, ingesting it. They're great in salads and soups. I actually have used calendula flowers in different ferments too, like fermenting cabbage or carrots. When I'm adding like the peppercorns and the salt, like the mustard seed, like, I wonder what plants I can add. If I have calendula flowers, I'll usually add those too.
Delicious. That sounds so good. I'm gonna do that when I make my pickles.
It's so fun. I'm like, how can I sneak herbs into this process? Because that's playing for me. Yes. But then also back to the lymphatic drainage, calendula has an affinity for helping promote lymphatic drainage along the lymph nodes of our neck, the cervical chain of lymph nodes, around the breasts and the armpits or the axilla, as well as the inguinal region or that groin area. Great at helping promote lymphatic flow, wound healing. Calendula is commonly an herb that is found in a lot of sitz bath herbal formulations. A sitz bath is essentially something, it's a big herbal infusion that you just sit yourself down in. Really great way to get herbal support with like postpartum care, after the delivery of a baby, hemorrhoids, varicose veins. It can be helpful topically for that, just the soothing and to help with the pain as well. There's so many actions for calendula. I wish that we had like 20 more minutes to talk about her. Yeah. What questions are coming up before we run out of time today? I want to make sure we tend to those.
Yeah, I was just saying we have just 5 minutes left. So, gosh, what an incredible plant. We had a comment in the chat saying calendula is fascinating, and I totally agree. It makes me want to go guerrilla scatter those seeds in my garden and harvest frequently so I can continue to be blessed by those beautiful orange and yellow flowers. Main question that came up is, what is the best way to ingest calendula? And now I'm curious to know, what is the best way to ingest it for medicinal properties for the lymph? Would that be through a tincture or through tea or through make, you know, sitting and in a sitz bath. I love those when I need them. Oh my God.
Yeah, you know, if you're trying, it just, it kind of depends where you want that action to go. Like if you're trying to address, like, let's say pelvic area, a sitz bath topically would be great. And an easy way to do that is just making a very strong, potent tea and adding that to the bath water and straining it before you do it so you don't have a big mess to clean up. But if you do want to add all the flowers to it, I just have actually a net, like a net that you clean, like, or you pick up fish from fish tanks. It's actually really effective at getting herbs out of the bathtub before you pull the drain. When it comes to herbal preparations, there's certain tiers of strength. So a tea is going to be your most gentle or mild potency of the herb, typically the safest. The next tier level is when you begin to tincture it, because you're tincturing a much more large volume and surface area amount of it. And that alcohol extracts and takes out a lot of those chemicals constituents so that you can just do like a couple dropperfuls of a tincture to get a significant amount of herb. A tier higher than that, that doesn't necessarily, isn't completely relevant to, I guess there, and then there's also the capsules, so powdered forms of calendula that you would buy. Typically, like, calendula can be found in different herbal formulations. I don't really see calendula capsules, maybe because the flower is just so desirable to take as is. And then there's essential oils that are very, very potent forms where there's medicine from a lot of the plants. Those can be pretty strong. I don't see calendula essential oil, but I just wanted to bring that one up as an example. I highly recommend not taking those internally unless instructed by your doctor that you have been working with and knows your health history and like how your organings are working and functioning. Don't take it internally unless someone like that is giving you that advice and knows your body. Otherwise, you know, aromatherapy and inhalation, topical with, you know, mixed with like a nice oil like apricot oil or olive oil to kind of dilute it a bit. Another thing with the calendula flower is that, again, it can be, it's actually got a long history of just culinary use too, to help with like supporting and getting in that medicine.
Yes, and I remember the first time I've ever heard of calendula, my friend bought a salve that featured calendula, and it was great for the skin. It was like coconut oil, calendula, and something else. And I'll tell you what, I have never looked back with using a little bit of coconut oil. Oh my goodness, it's just for me.
Yeah, you can harvest these. I highly recommend drying them first. Harvest and dry, just because you're less, you don't have to like worry about mold as much. Get that moisture out right away. Do an oil infusion with olive oil. And then that can be your topical. It makes it a little bit more potent than an infusion, and it's more shelf stable, and you can preserve it and hold on to it for a lot longer. And it's so pretty when it's soaking. The process of straining it out can be a little messy, but you know, if done with a little bit of lightness and humor and accepting that you're going to be covered in olive oil that smells like calendula,
right? Just put it right all over your skin and just rub it in, get a little massage.
Yes. And then from there you can make a salve, adding beeswax to it and other beautiful things like coconut oil, vitamin E, different essential oils. You could just keep it as an oil. Maybe you don't want to take the time to do that, and that's okay. Just massage like the olive oil infused calendula oil onto your body as well. Yes. One thing I do want to bring up with calendula, so as far as safety with it, it's from the aster family, which is a large plant family that also includes sunflowers, dandelions, daisies. If you have like an allergy to that family, you're going to want to be careful around calendula because it is from that plant family. And then one thing that isn't talked about as much, but I was reading about again this morning, is that it can promote menstrual bleeding. if you're taking a lot of it. So contraindication would be taking calendula flower internally when you're pregnant. That's definitely not an action that you want to have while you're gestating a little human. Or if you're dealing with cycle issues already and trying to work on getting regular cycles, you may not want to take calendula flower either, as it may promote early menstruation and reduced cycles from one cycle to the next.
Wow, thank you so much. There's this is such a fascinating plant. I definitely would love to talk about it for another hour.
I know, I didn't even get to talk about like the colors, and I was thinking about like chakras, right? Solar plexus and sacral chakra and all that fun stuff. But
the
another
empowerment.
day.
Another
Or maybe a
day
blog.
in a blog, and I'm really excited to share some resources with everybody. So this will be live on YouTube in within the week maybe, and we'll follow up with resources that you can read more about Mullen. And I would like to find some good websites that share medicine making processes, like your own recipes essentially, and using the inspiration that we learned with Sarah Sue today to keep planting, keep healing, and ingest the good stuff. But yeah, we're all so grateful for your time, Sarah Sue, and your expertise. Unfortunately, our time is running out, but you can catch us next month. I unfortunately won't be here, but Sarah Sue will be, and it's going to be the first Saturday, September 4th. We also have next week, we have a virtual education with Hawthorne Farm, a homesteading group in Woodinville. They're going to teach us about preserving, your summer harvests and make it last through the winter. There's just so much to learn and so much to appreciate, and you've been so fantastic. So everyone's saying thank you, getting some direct messages, getting some ones in the chat. Just thank you so much for your time. And
yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for all of your time for joining. Like this would not be so fun if I was doing it by myself. So, and the questions are great. If you have any further questions for me in particular, you can go to my website, journeyhomehealing.com. Go to the contact me page, and you can go ahead and write yourself a message to me. Write a message to me and send it my way, and I will be happy to respond.
Awesome. Yes, please check out her website, and that is another resource as well we're going to be sending out. Thank you all for joining us. We couldn't do it without you. It's just a beautiful community, and I'm glad you're in it. All right, until next time, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.